Please come home. She's destroying her, the maid called. What the Mafia boss saw froze him. A romantic thriller saga. The complete story. YouTube introduction. Put the phone down, or I'll cut the line, the voice hissed, smooth as silk wrapped around a razor blade. You think you know how this story goes? The fragile wife, the ruthless mafia boss, the jealous ex-lover. But in the world of Theo Cavendish, nothing is ever what it seems. When the most feared man in the city received a panicked call from his housekeeper, screaming that his wife was being destroyed, he expected to find a victim. He expected tears. What he found instead changed the balance of power in the underworld forever. This isn't a story about a damsel in distress. It's a story about what happens when you push a woman too far. Welcome to the unraveling of Cassia Vale. If you love dark romance with twists you won't see coming, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss a second of this. Cassia Vale stood by the archway of the living room, her fingers lightly touching the velvet upholstery of a chair she was terrified to sit in. 4 days, she repeated. Her voice was low, melodic, but threaded with a tension that never seemed to leave her. Is it safe? Theo turned then, his eyes the color of flint. For me? Always. For you? That depends on whether you remember the rules, Cassia. He walked over to her, the sound of his Italian leather shoes swallowed by the plush carpet. He towered over her, his presence a physical weight. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. It wasn't a gesture of affection, but of possession. He was checking for flaws in his acquisition. Stay inside, Theo commanded softly. The system is armed. Mrs. Halloway handles the groceries. You have your painting? You have the library? Do not open the door for anyone. I know, Cassia whispered. She looked at his hand, then up at his eyes. There was a desperate longing there, buried under layers of fear. She loved him. God help her. She loved the monster who had bought her father's debt and taken her as collateral. But she didn't understand him. Theo, I have a bad feeling. Feelings are inefficiencies, he stated, dropping his hand. Ignore them. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than the house she grew up in. Ilara creates the security schedules. If she calls, answer. If she needs to inspect the perimeter, let her in. No one else. Cassia froze. Ilara? She handles my domestic security now. Is that a problem? She hates me, Theo. Theo's expression didn't shift. She works for me. Her emotions are irrelevant. She is efficient. That is all that matters. He leaned in, kissing her forehead. His lips were cool. Be a good girl, Cassia. Don't break anything. With that, he was gone. The heavy steel door clicked shut, the electronic locks engaging with a series of heavy thuds that echoed like prison bars slamming home. Cassia was alone, or so she thought. For the first 2 days, the silence was a companion. Cassia spent her time in the sunroom, the only place in the fortress-like apartment that felt alive. She was a restoration artist, by trade, before Theo, and she channeled her anxiety into repairing a 17th-century porcelain vase she had convinced Theo to let her handle. It was delicate work, requiring breath-holding precision. It was the only time she felt in control. The city groaned below, a beast of concrete and exhaust. The sun beat against the windows, relentless. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the intercom buzzed. It wasn't the polite chime of a delivery, but the harsh, demanding rasp of the security override code being entered from the outside. Cassia set down her brush, her heart hammering against her ribs. The security panel on the wall turned from red to green. Access granted. The front door opened. The woman who stepped in brought the energy of a storm, despite the stillness of the day. Ilara Vance was beautiful in the way a switchblade was beautiful. Sleek, shining, and designed to cut. She wore a white suit that looked startlingly bright against the dark wood of Theo's foyer. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble, a military cadence. "Mrs. Halloway!" Ilara called out, her voice projecting through the vast space, ignoring Cassia entirely. "I need the logs for the service elevator. Now!" Mrs. Halloway, the stout, gray-faced housekeeper who had served the Cavendish family for 30 years, bustled out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked at Alara with reverence, and then at Cassia with a thinly veiled sneer. To the staff, Cassia was the interloper, the debt wife, the temporary fixture. Alara was royalty, the daughter of Theo's late partner, a woman bred for this world. Of course, Miss Vance, right away. Cassia stepped forward, smoothing her paint-stained smock. Alara, Theo said you might check the perimeter. He didn't say you'd be coming inside. Alara turned slowly. Her eyes were green, predatory, and amused. She looked Cassia up and down, lingering on the smudge of blue paint on Cassia's cheek. Theo says a lot of things to keep his pets calm, Alara said, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Security protocols have changed. There's a threat to the family. I need to do a sweep of the interior. Every room. I haven't prepared the guest rooms, Cassia stammered. I'm not a guest, darling, Alara said, stepping closer, invading Cassia's personal space until Cassia could smell her perfume. Something musky and expensive, like crushed orchids. I'm the safeguard. And you? You're just the liability. Alara brushed past her, her shoulder checking Cassia hard enough to make her stumble. Mrs. Holloway, start in the master bedroom. Strip the linens. Check for bugs. Electronic ones. She added with a cruel smirk. Cassia watched them go, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Theo was thousands of miles away. And the wolf was in the house. The invasion was slow, methodical, and terrifyingly silent. Alara didn't scream or shout. She didn't need to. She simply dismantled Cassia's existence, object by object. By the evening, the penthouse felt different. Alara had reorganized the furniture in the living room, claiming it improved sight lines for tactical defense. But Cassia knew the truth. Alara had moved Theo's favorite armchair away from the spot where Cassia usually sat to read to him. She had erased the intimacy of the space. Cassia retreated to her studio, her hands shaking. She picked up the porcelain vase, the cool ceramic grounding her. She applied a thin layer of adhesive to a hairline fracture. Focus, she told herself. Theo will be back tomorrow. Just survive until tomorrow. The door to the studio swung open. Alara stood there, holding a glass of red wine. She leaned against the doorframe, watching Cassia work. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. He doesn't love you, you know, Alara said conversationally. Cassia didn't look up. I'm working, Alara. He keeps you because he likes broken things, Alara continued, walking into the room. She ran a manicured finger along the edge of a canvas Cassia had painted. A dark, abstract swirl of blues and grays. He likes to think he can fix them. Or maybe he just likes to own the wreckage. Which is it, do you think? Theo and I have an understanding, Cassia said, her voice trembling slightly. An understanding. Alara laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You're a debt payment, Cassia. A transaction. You think because he bought you a ring and put you in a tower, you're a queen. You're a prisoner. Alara stopped in front of the workbench. She looked down at the vase. It was exquisite, a Ming Dynasty recreation, worth more than most people earned in a decade. This is nice, Alara murmured. Did he buy this for you? Or did you steal it from the collection? I'm restoring it for him, Cassia said defensively, instinctively moving to shield the object with her body. Please, Alara, step back. It's fragile. Fragile, Alara repeated. Her eyes flashed. Like you. With a sudden, violent motion, Alara reached out. She didn't grab the vase. She grabbed Cassia's wrist, her nails digging into the soft flesh, drawing a gasp of pain from the smaller woman. You think you're safe because he's not here? Alara hissed, her facade of cool professionalism dropping to reveal a raw, festering jealousy. You think you can play house in my world? You're weak, Cassia. You're soft. And softness gets people killed in this life. Theo needs a partner, not a pet. Let go of me, Cassia said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her heart was thundering. Or what? Alara challenged, tightening her grip. You'll call him? He's in a meeting with the Triad. He won't answer. And even if he did, who would he believe? The woman who runs his security, or the hysterical wife who hallucinates threats? Cassia yanked her arm back. The movement was jerky, uncoordinated. Her elbow clipped the workbench. The vase wobbled. Time seemed to slow down. Cassia lunged for it, her fingers brushing the smooth glaze. But Alara was faster. She didn't try to catch it. She simply watched. The vase hit the hardwood floor. It didn't just break. It shattered. Hundreds of hours of work, centuries of history, reduced to jagged shards in a fraction of a second. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Cassia stared at the debris, horror washing over her. "What did you do?" she whispered. Alara stepped back, her face twisting into a mask of mock sympathy. "Me? I didn't touch it. You're so clumsy, Cassia. Theo is going to be so disappointed. He loved that piece." "You pushed me!" Cassia accused, tears pricking her eyes. Not of sadness, but of pure, white-hot rage. "I tried to steady you," Alara lied smoothly. She turned to the door. "Mrs. Halloway! Mrs. Halloway! Come quickly! Mrs. Cavendish has had an accident." The housekeeper appeared moments later, eyes wide. She looked at the shattered vase, then at Cassia, who was standing over the ruins, hands clenched into fists. "Oh, madam," Mrs. Halloway tutted, shaking her head. "Mr. Cavendish specifically asked you not to handle the antiques without supervision." "She did it!" Cassia cried, pointing at Alara. "She made me drop it!" Now, Alara soothed, stepping beside the maid. "She's hysterical, Mrs. Halloway. It's the isolation. It's getting to her head. Perhaps we should lock the studio. For her own safety." "I think that's wise, Miss Vance," the maid agreed. "Get out," Cassia said. The words were low, guttural. Alara smiled. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my room," Cassia said, her voice rising. She grabbed a palette knife from the table. It wasn't a weapon, not really, but the way she held it, knuckles white, stance wide, suggested she was ready to make it one. "Careful," Alara warned, her smile fading. "Don't do something you can't take back." "I said get out!" Cassia screamed, swinging the knife through the air. It was a warning shot, miles from hitting anyone, but the intent was clear. Alara grabbed Mrs. Halloway's arm, feigning terror. "She's lost it. Come, Mrs. Halloway. Let's leave her to cool off." They retreated, the heavy oak door slamming shut. Then, the sound of a key turning in the lock. Cassia rushed to the door, pounding on it. "Open this! You can't lock me in here! This is my house!" "It's Theo's house." Ilara's voice came from the other side, muffled but dripping with malice. "You just live in it." Cassia slid down the door, pulling her knees to her chest. She looked at the shattered vase. The pieces glinted in the dying sunlight. They looked like teeth. She wasn't crying. That was the surprise. She sat there, in the deepening gloom, and felt something inside her click into place. It was the same sound the lock had made. If they wanted her to be the villain, if they wanted her to be the destroyer, maybe she should show them what that actually looked like. 24 hours later, Theo Cavendish landed at the private airfield on the outskirts of the city. The meeting in Macau had ended early, a negotiation that concluded with a handshake rather than a shootout, which was a pleasant surprise. He checked his phone as he walked toward the waiting black SUV. 3 missed calls from Mrs. Halloway, none from Cassia. A primal instinct, the one that had kept him alive in the gutters of Naples and the boardrooms of New York, flared at the base of his neck. "Home," he told the driver. "Fast." He dialed Mrs. Halloway. She answered on the first ring, and the sound that came through the speaker made his blood run cold. It wasn't words. It was the high-pitched shriek of a fire alarm in the background, and the maid's hyperventilating sobbing. "Mrs. Halloway, report," Theo barked. "Sir, oh, thank God. Sir, you have to come. It's Mrs. Cavendish. Oh God, she's destroying her. She's destroying everything." "Who?" Theo demanded. "Who is she destroying?" "Miss Vance. Alara. She's killing her, sir. There's blood. There's so much noise. Please come home. She's destroying her." The line went dead. Theo stared at the phone. Cassia? Killing Alara? It was impossible. Cassia, who apologized to spiders before putting them outside. Cassia, who flinched when he raised his voice. But Alara. Alara was a trained combatant. If there was violence, Alara would be the one inflicting it. "Drive," Theo growled, leaning forward until he was practically in the front seat. "Run the lights." The drive took 20 minutes. It felt like 20 years. Theo imagined every scenario. A hit squad. Ilara betraying him. Cassia hurt. Cassia dead. The thought made a dark void open up in his chest. He realized with terrifying clarity that if Cassia was gone, he would burn the city to the ground. The elevator to the penthouse required a retina scan. It took 2 seconds. Theo had his gun drawn, a custom Sig Sauer, before the doors even slid open. The first thing that hit him was the smell. It wasn't blood. It was chemical, turpentine, burning fabric, and something metallic. The penthouse was a war zone. The hallway was filled with smoke, though the sprinklers hadn't triggered yet. A frantic Mrs. Halloway was cowering behind the marble console table, her hands over her ears. "Where are they?" Theo shouted over the alarm. Mrs. Halloway pointed a trembling finger toward the double doors of the main salon. The doors were closed. Theo moved. He didn't run, he flowed, tactical and precise. He reached the doors, kicked the lock mechanism, and burst into the room, weapon raised, scanning for threats. "Drop it!" he roared. Then he froze. The scene before him defied every logic his brain tried to impose on it. The room, usually a pristine gallery of beige and cream, had been transformed. The expensive silk drapes had been ripped down and were piled in the center of the room. The furniture was overturned. Ilara Vance was there, but she wasn't the aggressor. Ilara was backed into the corner near the fireplace. Her pristine white suit was slashed and stained with red paint. Not blood, paint. Her hair was wild, her face a mask of genuine, unadulterated terror. She held a fireplace poker, but she was shaking so hard she could barely keep it upright. And standing in the center of the chaos was Cassia. She was unrecognizable. She wore one of Theo's white dress shirts, now splattered with black and crimson oil paint. Her hair was slicked back with sweat and turpentine. In her hand, she didn't hold a gun. She held a blowtorch, the kind used for creme brulee or, in her case, stripping varnish off antique wood. The blue flame hissed aggressively in the silence that fell as the alarm suddenly cut off. But it wasn't just the blowtorch. The walls. Theo's eyes widened. The massive cream-colored walls of the salon, usually adorned with benign landscapes, were covered in writing. Thick, black charcoal scrawls. Liar, thief, usurper. And over the mantelpiece, where a portrait of Theo's father usually hung, Cassia had painted a mural. It was crude, violent, and terrifyingly powerful. It depicted a wolf, Ilara, being devoured by a swarm of moths. "Cassia!" Theo breathed, lowering his gun slightly. Cassia turned to him. Her eyes were manic, bright with a feverish intensity he had never seen. She didn't look scared. She looked high. High on adrenaline, high on rage. "She told me I was broken," Cassia said, her voice eerily calm in the wreckage. She gestured to Ilara with the lit blowtorch. "She told me I was just a debt, a thing you bought." Cassia took a step toward Ilara, and the trained assassin flinched, shrinking back against the wall. "So I decided to redecorate," Cassia whispered, a terrifying smile ghosting her lips. "I decided to show her what it looks like when the thing breaks the owner." Theo looked at Ilara, who was physically unharmed, but psychologically dismantled. He looked at his wife, standing amidst the ruins of $1 million worth of interior design, holding fire in her hand, looking like a vengeance goddess rising from the ashes. The maid had said she's destroying her. Theo realized now she hadn't meant physically. Cassia had stripped Ilara of her dignity, her dominance, and her composure, simply by refusing to be the victim. For the first time in his life, Theo Cavendish didn't know who was the most dangerous person in the room, and God help him, he had never found his wife more attractive. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. The smell of butane and oil paint hung in the air, a pungent incense for the ritual Cassia had just performed. Theo didn't move for a long moment. He looked at the ruined drapes, the overturned furniture, and the charcoal accusations scrawled across the walls. $1 million in damage. In the old world, the world before this moment, he would have calculated the cost. He would have been furious. But looking at Cassia, chest heaving, eyes blazing with a feral light he hadn't known she possessed, the only thing Theo felt was a dark, curling heat in his gut. "Ilara," Theo said. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly level. Ilara Vance peeled herself away from the wall. She tried to smooth her ruined suit, tried to summon the arrogance that usually armored her. But the cracks were visible. She was a predator who had just been mauled by a rabbit. She didn't know how to process it. "Theo," Ilara began, her voice shaking. "She's psychotic. Look at this. She destroyed—" "I see what she destroyed." Theo cut her off. He walked slowly into the center of the room, stepping over a shattered crystal decanter. He stopped in front of Cassia. Cassia didn't back down. She gripped the blowtorch tighter. The blue flame finally extinguished, but the metal nozzle still glowing hot. She waited for the blow. She waited for him to yell, to strike her, to throw her out. She had burned her bridges. She was ready to burn with them. Theo reached out. Cassia flinched, a reflex she couldn't control, but he didn't strike. He took the blowtorch from her hand, his fingers brushing against her paint-stained knuckles. He set the tool down on a ruined coffee table. Then he turned to Ilara. "Get out," he said. Ilara blinked. "Excuse me. Theo, I am your head of security. She is a liability. She just proved it. She's unstable." "She defended her territory," Theo corrected, his eyes cold as the ocean floor. "You entered my home. You threatened my wife. You thought she was weak, so you toyed with her." He walked toward Ilara, and for the first time, the security specialist looked genuinely afraid of the man she worked for. "You made a miscalculation, Ilara," Theo murmured. "You assumed she was just a debt payment. You forgot who chose her. Do you think I would marry a woman who couldn't survive a storm?" I was testing the perimeter," Ilara stammered, backing toward the door. "You failed the test," Theo said. "You're reassigned. The docks. Night shift. If I see you near the penthouse again, I won't send you away. I'll bury you." Ilara's face went white. The docks were a punishment detail, a place for grunts and failures. It was a humiliation worse than death for someone of her station. She looked at Cassia one last time, a look of pure, distilled hatred, and then fled the apartment. The heavy door clicked shut. They were alone. Mrs. Halloway had vanished, likely hiding in the pantry. Theo turned back to Cassia. She was trembling now, the adrenaline crash beginning to set in. Her legs gave way, and she sank onto the floor, surrounded by the debris of her rebellion. Theo knelt in front of her. He didn't care about the paint getting on his $3,000 suit. He took her face in his hands. "Why?" he asked. It wasn't an accusation. It was genuine curiosity. "She broke the vase," Cassia whispered, her voice cracking. "The one I was fixing for you. She said I was broken, that you only liked broken things." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "Is that true, Theo? Am I just wreckage to you?" Theo looked at the charcoal words on the wall. Liar. Thief. He looked at the mural of the wolf being eaten by moths. It was savage. It was beautiful. "No," Theo said, his thumb wiping a smudge of black charcoal from her cheek. "Wreckage is useless. You are a revelation." He pulled her into him, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of turpentine and sweat. He should be angry. He should be terrified of the madness she had displayed. But all he felt was an intoxicating rush. The glass doll he had kept on a shelf had just shattered the glass and picked up a shard. "I'm sorry about the room," Cassia mumbled against his shoulder, the fight draining out of her. Theo looked around the devastated salon. "I never liked the beige anyway. The truce was fragile." The next morning, the penthouse was silent again. But the quality of the silence had changed. It wasn't the silence of a tomb anymore. It was the silence of a held breath. A cleaning crew had arrived at dawn. Men in nondescript gray coveralls who worked with the efficiency of a crime scene unit. By noon, the ruined furniture was gone. The walls were stripped and primed for repainting, and the smell of smoke had been replaced by the scent of strong coffee. Cassia sat at the kitchen island, nursing a mug of tea. She felt hollowed out, her body aching as if she'd run a marathon. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the blue flame of the blowtorch and Ilara's terrified face. Shame curled in her stomach. She wasn't a violent person. She saved things. She fixed things. What had she become? Theo entered the kitchen. He had shed his suit for dark jeans and a black turtleneck, looking less like a CEO and more like the cat burglar he might have been in another life. "Eat," he said, sliding a plate of toast and fruit toward her. I'm not hungry. That wasn't a request. Theo poured himself a black coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her. We have a dinner tonight. Cassia looked up sharply. Dinner? Theo, look at me. Look at this house. I can't go to a dinner. It's not a social call. It's business. The Valenti family. They're pressing on the southern territories. I need to show strength. So take your men, Cassia snapped, her temper flaring again, a remnant of yesterday's fire. Take your guns. Why do you need me? Theo moved closer, trapping her between his body and the marble counter. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was overwhelming. Because yesterday, you didn't just break furniture, Cassia. You shifted the narrative. The staff talks. Word is already on the street that my wife went feral on my head of security. Cassia paled. They know? Everyone knows everything in my world, Theo said. The Valentis will expect to see a woman on the edge of a breakdown. They'll expect me to be distracted, managing a hysterical wife. They see it as a weakness. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck, his pulse beating steadily against her skin. I want to show them they're wrong, Theo whispered. I don't want the glass doll tonight, Cassia. I want the woman who painted a massacre on my living room wall. I want the Queen of Ashes. I don't know if I can be her again, Cassia admitted, her voice small. I was scared, Theo. I snapped. Good, Theo said, his eyes darkening. Snap again, but this time pointed outward. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and set it on the counter. Wear this, the red dress, the one you hate because it's too bold. Be ready at 7. He turned to leave, but stopped at the doorway. And Cassia? Yes, Alara was right about one thing, he said, not looking back. I do like broken things, but not because I want to own the wreckage. Because when you glue them back together, the cracks are where the light shines through. Cassia stared at the empty doorway. She opened the velvet box. Inside sat a necklace, a choker of black diamonds, sharp and glittering. It looked less like jewelry and more like a collar, or perhaps armor. She touched the cold stones. She thought of her father, a weak man who had gambled her life away. She thought of Alara, who had sneered at her weakness. She went to the bedroom. She found the red dress. It was silk, backless, and the color of fresh arterial blood. If Theo wanted a weapon, she would give him one. The venue was an opera house that had been converted into a private club for the city's elite, and it's corrupt. The ceiling was a fresco of fallen angels. The chandeliers dripped crystal like frozen tears, and the air hummed with the sound of string quartets and whispered conspiracies. Theo and Cassia arrived late. It was a power move, and Cassia knew it. When they stepped into the private box overlooking the main floor, heads turned. The Valenti brothers, 3 men with necks as thick as tree trunks and suits that cost more than Cassia's education, were already seated at the main table below, surrounded by their entourage. Theo wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, but all eyes were on Cassia. The red dress flowed around her like liquid fire. The black diamonds at her throat caught the light, glittering dangerously. She had painted her lips a deep crimson and left her hair loose, a dark cascade down her bare back. She didn't look down. She didn't cling to Theo's arm. She walked beside him, her chin high, her eyes scanning the room with a cold detachment she had borrowed from him. Don't smile, Theo had instructed her in the car. Smile like you know a secret that could ruin them. They descended the grand staircase to the main floor. The conversation in the room lulled. Marco Valenti, the eldest brother, stood up. He was a bear of a man with a smile that showed too many gold teeth. Theo! Marco boomed, opening his arms. And the little wife. We heard you had some domestic troubles. I hope everything is resolved. It was a dig, a public probing of the rumor mill. The room went silent, waiting for Theo's response. Theo didn't speak. He looked at Cassia. Cassia stepped forward. She didn't wait for Theo to introduce her. She looked Marco Valenti dead in the eye. Domestic troubles imply a disagreement, Mr. Valenti, Cassia said, her voice clear and carrying over the music. What we had was a renovation. I found the old decor stifling, so I removed it. Marco blinked. He hadn't expected her to speak. Removed it? With fire, Cassia added, a small, razor-thin smile curving her lips. It clears the air. You should try it. starting with that tie." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the room. Marco flushed a deep purple. He had been insulted, but in a way that was so audacious, he couldn't immediately react without looking petty. Theo's hand settled on the small of her back. It was warm, grounding. He was proud. "My wife has an artistic temperament," Theo said smoothly, taking a seat and pulling out a chair for her. "I find it inspiring." The dinner was a battlefield of passive-aggressive toasts and veiled threats. Cassia ate nothing. She drank water and watched the men. She saw how they looked at Theo, with fear and respect. And she saw how they looked at her, with confusion. They couldn't place her. Was she the victim, the trophy, or something else? Midway through the third course, a waiter leaned in to pour wine for Cassia. As he did, he slipped a folded napkin onto her lap. Cassia froze. She looked up, but the waiter was already moving away. He was young, terrified, his hands shaking so hard the wine bottle rattled. Under the table, Cassia unfolded the napkin. Inside was a note scrawled on rough paper. "He didn't buy your debt. He created it." Cassia's heart stopped. She read the words again. "He didn't buy your debt. He created it." She looked at Theo. He was laughing at something Marco said, his profile sharp and handsome in the candlelight. The man who had saved her from her father's ruin. The man who claimed to protect her. If the note was true, Theo hadn't just paid off the shark circling her father. He was the shark who had sent them. He had engineered her family's collapse just so he could acquire her. Nausea rose in her throat. The red dress suddenly felt tight, suffocating. The black diamonds felt like a noose. "Cassia?" Theo's voice was low, intimate. He had noticed her shift in demeanor immediately. "Are you all right?" Cassia crushed the napkin in her fist, hiding it against her thigh. She looked at him, really looked at him. The architect, the man who dismantled lives brick by brick. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice brittle. "Just a headache. The air is thin in here." "We'll leave soon," Theo promised, squeezing her hand. Suddenly, the glass doors at the front of the club shattered. There was no sound of an explosion, just the high-pitched crash of tempered glass giving way. Smoke canisters rolled across the floor, hissing gray plumes that instantly obscured the room. Screams erupted. The string quartet stopped with a discordant screech. "Down!" Theo roared, tackling Cassia out of her chair, just as the first spray of automatic gunfire chewed through the expensive tablecloth. They hit the floor hard. Theo covered her body with his, a human shield. "Valenti!" Cassia screamed over the noise. "No!" Theo gritted out, pulling his gun from a shoulder holster. "Valenti is screaming too! This is a third party!" Through the smoke, figures in tactical gear were rappelling from the balcony. They weren't shooting at random. They were moving with precision. They were coming for their table. "Can you run in those heels?" Theo shouted. "I can run barefoot," Cassia yelled back, kicking off her shoes. "Go to the kitchen, the back exit. My driver's there." "What about you?" "I'm going to buy you time." Theo looked at her, his eyes fierce. "Go, Cassia! Run!" He shoved her toward the service doors and turned, firing 2 shots into the smoke. Cassia scrambled on her hands and knees, the expensive dress tearing on the glass-strewn floor. She reached the swinging doors of the kitchen and pushed through. She didn't stop. She ran past the screaming chefs out into the alleyway. The cool night air hit her face, but the black SUV wasn't there. Instead, a gray van idled at the curb. The side door slid open. Alara Vance sat inside. She wasn't wearing a security uniform. She was wearing street clothes, and she held a suppressed pistol. "Get in, Mrs. Cavendish," Alara said, her smile sharp and cold. "We have a lot to talk about, starting with that note in your hand." Cassia looked back at the club. Gunfire echoed from inside. Thea was in there fighting for her, or fighting for his property. She looked at the napkin in her fist. He created it. Cassia stepped into the van. The van smelled of stale cigarettes and ozone. Cassia sat in the passenger seat, the suppressed pistol resting casually on Alara's thigh, pointing directly at Cassia's ribs. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. Cassia still clutched the crumpled napkin in her hand. He created it. "You're quiet," Alara said, her eyes fixed on the road. "Usually the hostages are crying by now." "I'm not a hostage," Cassia said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I got in because you wanted to know." Alara laughed, a bitter sound. She reached into the glove compartment and tossed a manila folder onto Cassia's lap. Read it. The paper trail, shell companies, offshore accounts, all leading back to Cavendish Holdings. Cassia opened the folder. The dim streetlights flickered over documents that detailed the systematic dismantling of her father's business. Loans offered with impossible interest rates. Suppliers bought out and instructed to cancel contracts. It was a demolition, executed with the precision of a surgeon. Why? Cassia whispered. My father was nobody. Why would Theo care? Because he saw you, Ilara said, turning a corner sharply. 3 years ago, at a charity gala you catered. You dropped a tray of champagne. Everyone laughed. But Theo, he looked at you like you were the only water in a desert. Ilara's grip on the steering wheel tightened, her knuckles white. He didn't want to date you, Cassia. He wanted to own you, but he couldn't just take you. He needed you to have nowhere else to go. He needed to be your savior. Cassia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The man who held her when she had nightmares, the man who brushed her hair. He had engineered the nightmare itself, just to wake her up from it. He's a monster, Ilara hissed. And tonight, we're going to kill the monster. We? You're the bait, darling. Theo won't walk into a trap for money. But for you, he'll walk into hell. Ilara glanced at her. Help me end him, and you get the accounts, the money, the freedom. You can disappear. Cassia looked at the gun, then at the files. It made sense. It made terrible, perfect sense. Theo, the architect. He didn't leave things to chance. Where are we going? Cassia asked. The place where he tried to bury me, Ilara said. The docks. They pulled into a vast, industrial shipyard. Shipping containers were stacked like rusted skyscrapers. Ilara marched Cassia into a warehouse, forcing her to sit on a wooden crate in the center of the vast, empty space. He'll track the necklace, Ilara said, gesturing to the black diamonds around Cassia's throat. I'm counting on it. She took a position in the shadows, atop a gantry overlooking the floor. Don't move. Don't speak. When he comes in, I take the shot. Cassia sat alone in the pool of light. She touched the necklace. He created the debt. But then she remembered the other words on the wall. Liar. Thief. And she remembered Theo standing in the wreckage of his living room, looking at her, not with anger, but with awe. Use the cracks, he had said. That's where the light shines through. Cassia looked at the floor. It was concrete, stained with oil. But near her foot, there was a loose metal pipe. She didn't know whose side she was on. But she knew one thing. She was done being a pawn in their game. Theo didn't bring an army. He brought silence. He moved through the shipyard like smoke. He knew Ilara would expect a frontal assault. Vehicles, shouting, suppressing fire. That was how standard security teams operated. But Theo wasn't security. He was the blade in the dark. He had tracked the GPS in the necklace to Warehouse 4. He knew it was a trap. He didn't care. He slipped through a side ventilation hatch, dropping noiselessly onto a catwalk 40 feet above the ground. Below, he saw her. Cassia, sitting in a circle of light, her red dress torn, her head bowed. And he saw Ilara, positioned on the opposite gantry, her sniper rifle trained on the entrance. Theo crept forward. He could have shot Ilara then. A clean shot to the back of the head. It would be easy. But then Cassia raised her head. I know you're here, Theo, she called out. Her voice echoed in the cavernous space. Ilara tensed, scanning the shadows. She showed me the files. Cassia continued, standing up. She didn't look afraid. She looked furious. She told me you ruined my father on purpose, that you bought my life before I even knew it was for sale. Theo stepped out of the shadows on the high walkway. He didn't raise his gun. Is it true? Cassia shouted up at him. Yes, Theo said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Ilara laughed from her hiding spot. You hear that? He admits it. Shoot him, Cassia, or I will. Why? Cassia demanded, ignoring Ilara. Why did you do it? Because Valenti had purchased your debt 2 weeks before I did, Theo said, his voice calm, carrying across the distance. Your father gambled away your house, Cassia. But when that wasn't enough, he put you on the table. Marco Valenti accepted the collateral. Cassia froze. Valenti, the man with the gold teeth and the dead eyes. Valenti doesn't take wives, Theo continued, walking slowly along the rail. He takes toys, and when he breaks them, he throws them away. I couldn't stop the debt. It was already legal, so I became the creditor. I forced your father into bankruptcy so I could buy the debt out from under Valenti before he came to collect you. You could have told me, Cassia said, tears streaming down her face. You could have just helped me. And you would have hated me for charity, Theo said. Or you would have tried to pay me back. I didn't want your money, Cassia. I wanted you safe. And in my world, the only way to keep something safe is to own it. Touching, Ilara sneered. She stepped out from behind a pillar, leveling her rifle at Theo. But ownership expires tonight. She fired. The bullet sparked off the railing inches from Theo's hip. He vaulted over the side, dropping to the container below. Kill him! Ilara screamed, firing again. Theo rolled, coming up with his gun raised. But Ilara had the high ground. She had him pinned. Cassia, run! Theo shouted. Cassia didn't run. She looked at the metal pipe on the floor. She looked at a rusted lever on the wall near her, the control mechanism for the overhead crane. Ilara was standing directly under the massive steel hook of the crane, focused entirely on pinning Theo down. Cassia grabbed the pipe. She didn't attack Ilara. She attacked the control box. She swung the pipe with all the rage of the woman who had burned a living room. She smashed the locking mechanism and slammed the lever down. Above Ilara, the gears groaned. The massive chain, holding a 2-ton shipping container, released. Ilara looked up too late. The container didn't hit her. Cassia wasn't a murderer. But it crashed down onto the gantry 3 feet away from her. The impact was like a bomb going off. The metal walkway twisted and collapsed. Ilara screamed as the floor fell out from under her. She tumbled 20 feet, landing hard on a stack of pallets. Her rifle skittered away across the concrete. Silence returned to the warehouse. Theo was on the ground floor in seconds. He kicked the rifle away and stood over Ilara. She was groaning, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle, defeated. He didn't look at her. He looked at Cassia. Cassia stood by the wall, the metal pipe still in her hand, her chest heaving. The red dress was ruined. The black diamonds were crooked. She looked magnificent. Theo holstered his gun. He walked over to her, stopping just out of reach. He respected the weapon in her hand. You saved me, he said. I didn't save you, Cassia replied, dropping the pipe. It clattered loudly. I just didn't let her win. She reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace. It fell into her palm, heavy and cold. She held it out to him. Take it. Theo looked at the diamonds. I gave that to you. As a collar, she said. I don't wear collars anymore, Theo. He took the necklace. His eyes were unreadable. So, you're leaving. You manipulated my life, Cassia said. You lied to me every day for 2 years. You made me think I was helpless so you could be the hero. I did, Theo admitted. I would do it again to keep Valenti away from you. I know, Cassia said. She stepped closer to him. That's the problem. You think love is control. You think safety is a cage. She reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his wallet, and took out a black credit card. I'm taking this, she said. Consider it severance pay for the renovation work. Where will you go? Theo asked. For the first time, his voice cracked. He looked ready to burn the world down if she said the word. I don't know, Cassia said. She started walking toward the exit. But for the first time in my life, nobody owns the destination. She stopped at the warehouse doors. She turned back. Theo stood alone in the center of the vast space, the fallen Ilara moaning in the background, the diamonds dangling uselessly in his hand. If you ever want to see me again, Theo, Cassia called out, don't send a driver, don't send a guard, and don't send a contract. What should I send? He asked. Cassia smiled. It wasn't the smile of a victim. It was the smile of the Queen of Ashes. Send the truth, and maybe ask me on a real date. She pushed the doors open and walked out into the night. Theo watched her go. He looked at the diamonds in his hand. He closed his fist around them until they cut into his skin. He turned to the moaning Ilara. He pulled out his phone. Get a medical team to Warehouse 4, he said into the receiver. And get a cleaner. And sir? The voice on the line asked. Should we track Mrs. Cavendish? Theo looked at the empty doorway, where the red dress had vanished. No, Theo said softly. Cancel the tracking protocols. Disengage the security detail. Let her run. Sir, is that safe? No. Theo smiled, a genuine, dangerous smile. It's not safe at all, but she doesn't need safety anymore. He hung up. He had spent his life building fortresses. It was time to learn how to live in the wild. And that is how Cassia Vale walked out of the cage and into the fire, leaving the most dangerous man in the city on his knees, not in defeat, but in devotion. The story doesn't end here. In fact, the real game has just begun. Will Theo be able to win her back without his power and money? Can Cassia survive a world that wants to eat her alive? If you want a season 2 of this dark romance saga, smash that like button and comment Queen of Ashes below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because in this channel, the happily ever after is never what you expect. Thanks for watching.